Hello everyone and welcome to Runthecheeseon. I won't say Runthecheeseon because my name is Eon and I just saw EON. Whoops. Anyways, make sure check out the link in description. This guy is freaking amazing. He's a fellow Christian and he's going to be reading the Bible. Well, at least the book of Genesis, the first chapter. I'll be splitting this video in half because it's gonna be too long for you guys to actually enjoy it. And now, yeah, make sure to like and subscribe, and let's get into it.
What's up? It's me. Today I'm gonna be reciting to you the entire book of Genesis. I don't know how long this video is gonna be, but I'll try and get through it. Let's begin. So, in the beginning, there was nothing except God. Nothing existed, nothing was around, it was nothingness and God. And then God decides that in that nothingness, he is going to create a place called Earth. He made everything, the grass, the earth, the waters, and the creatures that inhabit the land and the sea. And amongst those creatures, he made two creatures called Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were perfect. They had everything.
Yeah.
But God gave them one simple rule, and that was...
Oh, and also, for those who don't know, Eve came from one of the ribs from Adam. Okay, just gonna add that detail.
To not eat from the forbidden fruit
I just
of the
felt that was
forbidden
cool.
tree. See, Adam and Eve were placed in the Garden of Eden, a utopia, a perfect place. There was no pain, there was no agony, there was nothing. Pain, deception, no bad thing existed there. And then, one day, Eve goes up to the tree and she sees a snake, slithering towards her. Which, it wasn't a snake, by the way, it was a serpent. And the serpent basically says that if you eat from the tree, not only will you have knowledge, but you'll be just like God. And Eve, looking at it, she's like, oh, well, that's amazing. I should eat from this tree. But before that, she's like, wait, but didn't God tell me not to eat from the tree? And so, the serpent, he's tempting her. So he's like, yeah, but like, you'd be just like God. And
Yeah.
Eve is like, oh, okay. Bet I should just eat from it then.
will.
So she eats it, and then instead of just savoring it all for herself, she takes it to Adam, and Adam eats it. Now, when they ate from the forbidden fruit, it gave them knowledge that they didn't want. So, at first they were naked because they were innocent. They didn't know what nakedness was. They felt no shame, no regret, no nothing. And then when they ate from the fruit, Adam instructs Eve and himself that they should, put on some leaves to clothe themselves and that they should hide. And then God comes down and he's like, yo, where are you guys? Why do you hide from me? And then Adam and Eve are like, yo, we just didn't want you to see that we were naked. And then God being God, he's like, how did you guys know you were naked? And then Eve is like, the serpent you created tricked me. God sees this and he's like,
No, technically no. Like, they did became kind of like God. They had knowledge now. They have knowledge of everything. The good and the evil.
oh, okay. And he punishes the serpent. So the serpent was like a lizard. And then when God cursed it, it turned into a snake. And then God punishes Adam and Eve. He goes up to Eve and he's like, Eve, you're punished. You're going to have periods and childbirth is going to be painful. He didn't mention periods. That's just... So he goes up to Eve and he's like, to punish Eve, he's like, your childbirth is going to be very painful. And then he goes up to Adam and he's like, Adam, because you did what you did, life won't be easy anymore. You're going to have to work hard and you're going to have to labor to get your food. And then God banishes them from the Garden of Eden. And to make sure that they didn't come back into the Garden of Eden, God made sure that there was an angel with a sword made of like fire, so they couldn't go back into the Garden of Eden. And then sooner or later they have clothes because God, I forgot to mention this, but God gifted them garments to keep them warm.
See, even after they sinned, God still gave and provided for them. Before banishing them. So.
And then sooner or later they have children. And they named the two boys, which they had sons, were Cain and Abel. Adam teaches Cain and Abel about God. They're like, okay, God is good all the time. We should start worshiping and we should give sacrifices to him. So Cain and Abel, as they get older, the time comes where they're about to give sacrifices to God. So Cain and Abel are about to give, sacrifices to God. Abel is sacrificing his flocks, and Cain, he's only thinking about his crops, so he sacrifices his crops. God is like pleased with Abel and his sacrifice, but Cain, he's hating on Abel. And then Cain is, he's hating on Abel. So he's like, bet, I'm gonna smoke Abel. So, long story short, Cain smokes Abel. And then...
Yeah, long story short, it's basically like that. But God needed a specific sacrifice, but he sacrificed his own good works instead of what God asked of him. I'm pretty sure, at least. And that's why he was upset. And because he was jealous. Because God favored him more than Cain? Yeah, Cain.
Cain tries to hide it, like God isn't all-knowing. So Cain tries to hide that he smoked Abel. And, eventually God gets, he's God. So he's like, Cain, where's your brother? And then Cain is like, yo, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? And then God is like, yo, I know what you did. You're going to get punished for it. So sooner or later, Adam and Eve get word that Cain smoked Abel. So Adam and Eve get word that Cain smoked Abel, and they're grieving, and they're grieving, and they're like, yo, what, this actually sucks. Cain smoked our boy. Lord, what can you do for us? And then God, being God, he's like, bet, I'm finna give y'all another son. And, they have Seth. And then Seth had, 2 descendants. One was Enoch, and the second was Methuselah. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. Please give me a break. He was the oldest person to ever live. He lived a lifespan of 969 years. And so, as time goes... Oh, I also forgot to mention this. Cain also went on to start a civilization called Nod. Do with that information as you will. And then, slowly but surely, the world just, devolves into madness, right? Wickedness is happening. People start worshiping idols. People are just committing all types of sin. But there's one righteous man amongst all of them that went by the name of Noah. And Noah is talking to the people. He's like, yo, y'all need to repent from your sin. Come back to the one true God who made y'all.
I like how he's like, yo, you guys need to turn away from your sin. Of course, they didn't actually talk like that, but it's just goofy of how he's personalizing it, because, you always should personalize the Bible in the ways you speak. It works fine, but you also need to keep in mind the original wordings of it, or the original meanings,
They're nagging Noah, so they're like, no. They're calling him names, and they're being mean.
Not only that, I'm pretty sure they also tried to threaten to kill him because of the different belief, and being extremely upset with him because he said, you are all living wrong, you are all going to die. No one will accept those news properly, but that's why they died. They did not accept warning. They were too prideful, they were too sinful to see.
And then Noah, being Noah, he starts praying, and then God starts talking to Noah, and then God speaks to my boy Noah, and he's like, yo, I regret making humans, so I'm finna wipe out wickedness, right? I'm finna flood the earth because I rock with you so hard. I'm finna give you some guidance, right? So you finna build the ark, so when this flood happens, you'll be good and your homies will be good too. And then Noah's like, bet, how do I build it? And then God is like, okay, I'm finna show you the measurements, and you just finna, I guess just memorize it, because I don't know how else he built that without forgetting.
Yeah, true. I'm pretty sure God just gave him the instructions, just placed into his mind, right? That's most likely, bro. No way a regular human can remember that good. Because back in the... actually maybe could, because it's back in the day when everything was different.
As Noah continues to build the ark, God tells Noah, yo, get 7 pairs of every animal, and Noah's like, bet. And then, sooner or later, the flood happens. Noah has his homies, his sons' wives with him. He has also his sons, too. And he just has his family, and they're cruising on the ark, and they're just, yeah. The flood happened for 40 days and 40 nights. And then, they start taking care of the animals, and then Noah's like, bet, it's time to see if there's land out there. So he sends out a raven, and he knows that if the raven goes out there and doesn't come back, that means it found land. And then the raven comes back, and it has a leaf with him, and then Noah's like, oh, bet, there's land. And so they land and they start thanking God. They're like, God,
Oh yeah, they send
you a
doves
real
too.
one. And then Noah comes out and he's just like praising God. And then God is like, yo, Noah, since I rock with you so hard, I'm gonna make a promise to you in the form of a wonder. So that's how the rainbow became a thing, because the rainbow was God's promise to Noah, being like, okay, I'll never end the world by flood again.
Noah will probably be thinking, wait, what do you mean by flood? I'll never end the world by flood again. Just the flood? Yeah, I mean, you know, just the flood. Because, oof, man, like the flood's one of the worst ways the world can just be destroyed, man. It's just, oof.
Okay, now we finna talk about the Tower of Babel. So the Tower of Babel was basically a bunch of people that thought they worked so well because they could communicate with each other, because back then they spoke in like one language, so it was very easy to talk to one another. So they were like, bet, since we work together so well, let's build a tower to heaven, and if we do that, we'll be powerful because we'll rule, and it's just finna be dope. And God, God senses their wickedness. He sees it, and he's like, bet.
Yeah, they're trying to get to God by their own works instead of by Him. You know, by faith. Wait, no, it wasn't. It was kind of by faith back then. They had sacrifices, but now no longer.
Really
because it's atonement.
Let that happen.
Because of
so
Christ.
He diverses their languages, and all of them start speaking in tongues for real. They just start speaking different languages, and they can't communicate with each other. So they stop working on the tower, and that's how different languages became a thing. Now we finna talk about Abram. Mind you, the stories I'm telling you are in chronological order in which they happened, so be free to look this up. So Abram is out late at night, and his wife Sarai comes up to him, and Sarai, his wife, is like, yo, baby, what you doing out here? It's late at night. And Abram proceeds to tell Sarai, he's like, baby girl, I gotta drop some knowledge upon you. So God just got done talking to me. Because God was speaking to Abram, he was like, yo, if God just told me to leave everything I have, and he's gonna make me the father of a great nation. Sorry, my bad. And then Sarai, his wife, is like, but baby, what's your father gonna think? And Abram's like, man, he ain't gonna take that lightly. So Abram goes up to his dad, and he's like, yo, Papa, your boy gotta leave to become the father of a great nation. And, Abram's dad, reasonably, is like, man, y'all, you ain't doing that by yourself. We, your family, we're gonna come with you. And by doing that, Abram kind of like disobeyed God, because God only told Abram that he was supposed to go by himself. Oh. And then Abram and his father and his tribe are talking, and they're walking, and they're just chatting it up. And Abram's dad says something between the lines of like, you should worship every single God. That way you don't make one mad if you left him out. Sorry, I got bad speaking pattern. And so Abram, your boy, and his entire tribe goes to a land called Haran. And then Terah, which was one of the people that left with them, was like, yo, I like it here, I'm gonna retire here. One day Terah gets smoked, like they pass away, and Abram becomes the leader of the entire tribe. And then Abram takes charge immediately. He's like, okay, bet, I'm gonna take this opportunity while I still can. I'm gonna gather the entire tribe, load up the animals, and I'm gonna obey my God, and I'm gonna go to where he told me to go. And you gotta think, though, Abraham was, like, trying to get to this, like, place for years. They were, like, nomads by the time they actually got there. And then, little by little, they start running out of food, and then Abram's like, oh, man, this sucks. And then he's like, okay, let's dip to Egypt so we can get some more food. And he's talking to Sarai, his wife, and he's like, baby, we finna dip to Egypt. You're so beautiful. If the Pharaoh sees you, he's gonna smoke me, and he's gonna take you as his wife. And then Sarai is like, oh, yeah, that's true. And then Abraham is like, yo, we should pretend to be brothers and sisters. That way he won't smoke me and take you. And then Abram's like, his fears basically come to life. Pharaoh sees his girl. He's looking her up and down. He's like, baby, you are fine. Yo, I need to say this again. They don't talk like this. I just need to say it again, but it's just too funny, bro. Abram, you're her brother? Yo, I'm finna pay you riches and gifts. That way, I'm taking your sister, bro, because you ain't getting her back. And then Abram's like, oh, this is bad. And then God,
because that's my wife.
Being God, he's like, hold up. This is Old Testament. and he hits them with plagues. That's right. You thought God was going to be peaceful? He hits them with plagues. No, seriously. He hits them with plagues, and then to protect his chosen family, and then the Pharaoh is like, yo, you didn't tell me she was your wife. Just take her. I don't want that smoke. And then Abram is like, yo, baby, I messed up, because he's talking to Sarai. He's like, yo, I messed up. I think we should like follow God instead of following my plans. And then Sarai's like, bet. Also, I'm never pretending to be your sister ever again. And so they leave Egypt, and then it wasn't really a good idea because they brought riches and gifts with them. And then Lot, Abram's nephew, starts making a fuss. He's like, yo, we should be the first ones to pick which land we want. And then Abram is like, okay, bet, I'm gonna go talk to him. So he takes Lot to like a land that they own, and they're like, yo, pick what you want, and I'll take the other. And then Lot's like, bet, I'm gonna take the one near Sodom. So he takes that one. And so after that, Lot gets kidnapped or captured. He gets captured. And then, you know, the tribesmen, they go to Abram, and they're like, yo, he got kidnapped. And Abram's like, okay, bet, we finna slide for Lot. So they smoke everybody, and they take Lot back, and they save everyone. And then a king goes up to Abram, and he blesses him, and he's like, you're cool. And then after the king blessed Abram proceeds to give the king a portion of everything he has. And then some time passes. Abram and Sarai are now old. Like, they're like, and then Abram has a dream, and God's like, you're gonna have more descendants than the stars. And then God is like, your name is not Abram, it's Abraham. He also changes Sarai's name to Sarah. Thank God, literally, because that name is so hard to pronounce. And then, you know, Abraham tells Sarah, he's like, yo, we're gonna have a kid. And Sarai is doubting him. Sarah is doubting him, and she's like, no, I don't think we are, so I'm just gonna get the maidservant to have your kids, and then I'll adopt it. And so Sarah goes up to Hagar, a maidservant, and she's like, yo, you finna have my man's kids, and then I'm gonna adopt it. Hagar is like, bet, say less. And so Sarah and Hagar, like, basically Sarah starts hating on Hagar because Hagar is having Abraham's kids. So Hagar not being able to take the abuse, she just leaves. And then an angel goes up to Hagar and is like, girl, where are you going? You have a duty to fulfill. And then Hagar is like, yo, she's being super mean to me. I can't take this anymore. I'm just finna dip. And then the angel is like, yo, you finna have a kid of your own, and his name is gonna be Ishmael. So Hagar returns, and she has a son named Ishmael, and she's like, everybody's celebrating. Except Sarah, she's hating on Hagar for having a kid with her husband. And then 3 strangers pull up to Abraham's crib, and they're like, yo, Sarah finna have a kid. And Abram's like, whoa, bet, I'm finna go tell Sarah. But Sarah was eavesdropping. The 3 messengers also tell Abraham that the city of Sodom is gonna be destroyed. And then Abraham's like freaking out, because that's where his nephew Lot is. And, you know, Abraham, he's freaked out by this, so he goes to God, and he starts to bargain with God. He's like, God, would you destroy the city of Sodom if there were 50 righteous good people in it? And God's like, no. And it's like, slowly but surely, Abraham is bargaining him down, like, to 10 people. And he's like, would you destroy it if there were 10 people in it? And God's like, no. If there's 10 good people in it, I'll destroy it. Oh, wait, no. He said that if he said that if 10 righteous people were in it, he would, like, save it if there were 10 righteous people in it. And, you know, God being God, he's like, okay, I'm gonna test Lot. So he sends 2 angels to the city of Sodom. Okay. And then, you know, the 2 angels being new to Sodom, people start noticing, and they're like, yo, we want those 2 people. Sorry, something and, you know, Lot invites these 2 strangers that he doesn't know into his house, and he's blocking the door so that the angry mob cannot get to the 2 angels. And they're like, yo, I can't say what they wanted to do to them. Destroy. Because YouTube guidelines are a thing, but they wanted the angels, and then Lot's like, no, you cannot have the 2. You cannot have them, because they didn't know they were angels. They were angels, but they called them strangers because they didn't know the true identity of the angels. And so they were like, yo, give us those 2 strangers you have. And then Lot's like, no, you can't have them. Instead, take my 2 daughters. Which is wild, seeing that what those 2 people wanted to do to the 2 strangers. And then, you know, Lot passed the test, so the angels start revealing their true form. They're like, bet, screw this. And they blind the people of the angry mob, and they're like, yo, I can't see. And then Lot's like, yo, what's going on? The angels are like, yo, we're actually angels. We need to get you out of here. There are no righteous people here. And then Lot's like, my family, I gotta go get my cousin. I gotta go get my family, cuz. And then the angels are like, okay, bet, go get him. And then Lot goes to get his family. They're not believing him, so he has no choice but to leave them. So it's him, his wife, and his 2 daughters, plus the 2 angels. So they get out of there, they're running out, and they're not turning back. One of the angels says, don't look back at the city of sin, or you're just gonna get smoked. And then, you know, Lot's wife, she's like, oh man, but it's my only home. So she turns around and she gets turned into a pillar of salt.
Yep.
Fast forward a little bit, and then Abraham is going up to him.
Bro got super dehydration 3, I guess. I mean, whoops. Well, rest in peace. But at the same time, like, they commanded not to look back. So, you know, that's why. If you disobey God, consequences will happen. Okay? But people always still ask, if he's so good, why does bad things happen? There are consequences. You know?
Mountain to worship God, and he sees like smoke coming up from the ground, and he's like, I wonder what that is. He sees Sodom is like destroyed, like there's no remnants of it. And then Abraham is like, back then. Yo, we finna dip. So they pack all their stuff and they move to a new thing. Sarah has a kid. They call the kid Isaac. And then, you know, slowly but surely, Hagar and Sarah start to like slowly bicker, and then Sarah's like, yo, bro, you better get this out of here, or else I'm gonna get mad. Sarah is basically telling Abraham, yo, we don't need Hagar anymore, get her out of here. And then Abraham, you know, being Abraham, he goes up to God and he's like, God, what do I do? And then, you know, God just straight up says, like, yo, just send Hagar on her way. I'll look after her and Ishmael. You're good. And then Hagar and Ishmael are off in the desert. And then Ishmael starts to get, like, dehydrated, like, severely. Like, he's like, oh. And then, you know, Hagar, she's like, nah, man, I can't look at this. So she turns her back because she can't watch her son, like, you know, pass away like this. So she's like, man. And then she starts praying. She's like, Lord, please just help us. We need help. And then God, you know, being a loving God, that's really he makes like a spring of water happen. So like now fresh water is pouring from like a rock. And she's like, yo, Ishmael, we're saved. And then, you know,
what is that body moving, man? We're saved.
You know, where God tests Abraham, and he's like, Abraham, take your son to a mountain and sacrifice him. This is how I'll know, like, basically like a loyalty test. So he's like, yo, smoke your son for me. And then Abraham, like, takes a second. He's like, okay. And he goes to smoke his son Isaac. And as they're going up, like, the mountain of which, like, Abraham is going to, like, try and sacrifice Isaac, like, Isaac is, like, getting suspicious. He's like, oh, well, where are we going? And, you know, like, Abraham's like, oh, we're going up to the mountain. And Isaac is like, oh, well, we don't have a sacrifice. And Abraham, like, lifting stuff, he's like, the Lord will provide. And so they get to the top of the mountain.
Wait, what?
Like, oh, well, where are we going? And you know, like, Abraham's like,
was so funny, bro.
We're going up to the mountain. And Isaac is like, oh, well, we don't have a sacrifice. And Abraham, like, lifting stuff, he's like, the Lord will provide. And so they get to the top of the mountain, and Abraham ties up his son. He puts him on a stack of sticks, and he's about to slice this boy up. He's about to go, and then God is like, stop, don't do that. I would never actually ask you to do something like that. But it was like a test of faith. It was a test of faith, and you proved yourself to me. And, you know, Abraham is consulting with Isaac. He's like, Isaac, I was going to do it because God told me to. We should always obey God. And Isaac is like, bet.
At least he understands. Anyways, that's where we'll leave it for now. I split it in half. Hope that's good. Anyways, make sure to like and subscribe. And please do check out Runthecheeseon. Bro's a very faithful Christian. And he does a lot of skits. And it's incredibly hilarious. You should check out his work. TikTok and YouTube, you know, but I'll be leaving a link to his YouTube. His TikTok is probably gonna be in his bio, I think, or like in the not description. I know about me part of the channel. Yeah, so make sure to like and subscribe. Check him out, like and subscribe to his stuff, and have a great day, everyone. Bye bye.